Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Spider-Man Miles Morales on the GTX 1650 non-super, the 4GB version GDDR6. To skip to any of the resolutions tested, check the timestamps in the description. So let's get started. First of all, I want to show you my 50 to 60 FPS configuration. We're using FSR 2.1 on quality. Upscale sharpness, I recommend you tweak this at your heart's content. Personally, 1 or 2 was my best way. It's a little bit too sharp over the 2 value. Then on graphics, medium textures, because if you go higher than this, the game is going to drop frames like crazy. Only 4 gigs of VRAM, unfortunately. Shadows on medium, because memory, once more. Ambient occlusion and screen space reflections are on. High level of detail, low traffic, low crowds. Here you can pull it down to low if you want better performance on cutscenes. Low depth of field as well for the cutscenes, and that's basically it. So these are the best settings from the Digital Foundry video, and I think they look pretty good, very similar to high. So yeah, my objective here was to get as close as possible to 60 without sacrificing the resolution below the quality preset on FSR 2.1. It's not perfect, it still drops into the 50s when close to trees, but this one is more demanding than Spider-Man Remastered, more effects, more stuff on screen. It's more ambitious effects wise. So swinging around you're usually fine. 50 to 60 for close to trees again. Expect frames to drop. Otherwise, should be fine. So my difficult, how to say this? My difficult scenario would be the... I forgot how to bring up the phone. There we go. One of the crimes called Street Shootout. I always test this one in this game because there's a good amount of enemies, effects on screen, lots of shooting, which is always good. And usually the roads are wet, so more reflections. So yeah, it's more realistic. Let's keep it that way. But usually the issue are the trees, which is fine. Makes sense. Transparencies are hard to render. And sometimes we get those drops into the 30s. I think those are memory related. Like you can see here, the VRAM goes up to 3900 megabytes. Usually when it's close to the limit, we're memory limited. Let's give it a shot. In here there's more effects, so yeah, hits the GPU the most. Let's see if we lower those textures to low, if that helps. Although low textures look terrible, but hey, it is what it is. We gotta get those FPS up. Okay, low textures applied. Okay, it's better. Instead of the upper 30s, it's in the mid 40s, low 40s. So yeah, this game is very effect heavy. So let's keep this on medium, and we lower the texture filtering a little bit. Usually doesn't make a huge difference, but let's keep it like on the PS5 on 4 times. But as you can see, effect heavy scenes like this is going to drop below 60. So for 1080p with FSR, yeah, you can use a lower FSR quality, but still it's going to look much blurrier. At that point I would just recommend trying a lower resolution like 900p with FSR on quality. Oh yeah. But I think we can go higher on the settings. If you don't mind dropping below 40, should be okay. Alright. So as you can see there, that's how it runs on these settings. Unfortunately not 60. Usually on effect heavy areas like this, again. Then moving around or less enemies on screen, it should be okay. So yeah, let's try higher settings. One moment. Okay guys, we're back with a higher setting, 1080p native instead of using FSR. So TAA, and on graphics, textures still on medium because VRAM limitation, and the rest basically on high. Personally, I don't think it's worth going for high. The settings I showed you before are still good looking. It looks almost the same, at least in what I've seen. So yeah, let's go for the same one. The shootout. So as you can see now, while swinging around, it drops into the 40s more often. Hopefully it doesn't become VRAM constrained while fighting all those enemies. But as you can see, in comparison to the previous one, it still drops frames very similarly.
People will get hurt if I don't stop that shootout. You think it's gonna be that easy?
Yeah, and now we are closer to 30 instead of the low 40s like before. As you can see. Especially when effects show up, like that. Hopefully with lower resolutions it's going to be fine, but who knows. Only one way to find out. So yeah, if you want native resolution, there you go. So I think it's time to go for 900p. I think I made my point on this one. Okay, so now 900p with the same settings as on 1080p when I started the video. FSR 2.1, quality. Then on graphics, medium textures because VRAM, 4 times isotropic like the PlayStation 5. Medium shadows to save on memory, SSAO, reflections, high level of detail, traffic and crowds on low, hair on medium, weather on medium with the weather particles. Low depth of field, that's basically it. So let's get back into it. So usually lowering the resolution in this case, like, I don't know, why do 900p instead of 1080p with lower FSR configurations? Well, that's because the game, when it upscales to 1080p, will use more memory. Not entirely sure why that is, how that works. But lowering the resolution itself, the screen resolution, helps quite a bit. Instead of, again, using a stronger FSR on 1080p. So yeah, swinging around now, instead of dropping into the 50s, we are over 70, or high 60s, better said. So let's try the same one. It's probably going to drop into the 40s again, because VRAM. But hey, gotta give it a shot. Hopefully, in this case, we stay over 60, but I highly doubt it. There's so many more effects, it's kind of ridiculous. But hey, you never know. Although FSR on 900p, I can see more blurriness, which was to be expected. Okay, not as bad. Yeah, we still drop into the 40s, but not into the 30s. So yeah, way more playable, I would say. Yeah, even with effects on screen. Yeah, way better than on 1080p, without a doubt, obviously. So here we're at the limit of the memory usage. So that's great. Yeah, I think this is probably the way I would play the game. Okay, let's try higher settings. High settings, basically. I think it's kind of a waste because it looks very similar to this. And it runs worse. But hey, gotta give the people what they want. So I'm very quickly going to show you higher settings. Usually I recommend restarting the game, but in this case it shouldn't matter that much. So let's put everything on high. I also avoiding 1440p because you can do it, but again, the resolution just will use more VRAM, so you're going to have to lower those textures. And let's be realistic, you probably do not have a 1440p monitor. Okay, so as you can see now, I dropped into the upper 20s. Although, I think this is because I didn't restart the game. So sometimes it's loading stuff in the background. So in general, you're going to just drop into the 30s more often. Which again, considering the visual difference, I don't think it's worth doing in this case. because there's more drops and the game doesn't look that much better. So anyway, I think it's time for 720p. 720p is probably going to be great. Oh, I forgot to increase the resolution, my bad. FSR disabled. So at least we have a higher resolution, right? So TAA native 900p with higher settings because we're targeting lower FPS, not 60s. So yeah, again, a few less frames, no big deal. So if you don't mind 30-ish FPS, you can play like this, native 900p. Which again is pretty similar to the performance we got on 1080p, but with a higher resolution. So in this case I wouldn't do 900p targeting 30. I think it's kind of a waste because you can do the same on 1080p and still get over 30. So yeah, now it's time for 720p. Okay guys, now at 720p, native. This is probably the best way to play it if you want 60 frames even on those high octane battles. On graphics, medium textures, yeah, even at 720p we cannot go for high textures unfortunately, which again 4 gigs of VRAM is the bottleneck. High shadows, slightly higher settings than on 900p and 1080p. Low depth of field because it still looks good and there's a performance difference, especially on cutscenes. Yeah, that's basically it. No FSR, of course, native 720. And now while swinging around, there's a higher FPS. There's higher FPS in general. The trees don't kill us as much. That's why I'm close to Central Park. I know I'm something of a genius myself. Alright, so let's do once again the street shootout.
Attacking the underground. Better get there before it escalates.
And let's do some tricks in the meantime. You got this, Miles! I'm also going to try Spider-Man Remastered. That one runs better. And it's not as memory constrained on this card. Because again, less effects, less ambitious game, the effects side of things. But still looks pretty good.
Can't let the underground and Rockstar fight here. Innocent people will get hurt.
So that we drop into the 50s. Okay,
Okay.
mid 50s, not bad. Could be much worse, honestly. So as you can see, you cannot escape the 50 FPS thingy, those drops. So yeah, it's a game limitation due to low video memory. So a card limitation, better said. And low textures doesn't help enough. And unfortunately, yeah, low textures looks terrible. Too muddy. So I would say even on 900p with FSR on quality, I think is good enough. It's a good balance. On the other hand, if you do 1080p quality FSR, it should still be serviceable, but in these situations, you can drop into the 40s instead of the 50s. More often, I mean. Is it unplayable on 1080p with FSR? No. But 900p seems to be a better balance. So at least stay into the 50s more often. But as I said a million times, heavy effect areas. Heavy areas. Because the game has a lot of use of those areas, especially in the story mode. Dead. Reduce 2 atoms. Anybody else?
on the underground are gonna tear the city apart.
So yeah, that's basically Spider-Man Miles Morales on the 1650 non-super. The super version, I guess, like 5 to 10 frames more. I think 5 frames more, but we're still memory constrained on that one. So yeah, you can still play this game pretty well. We're going to check out, probably tomorrow, Spider-Man Remastered, which is the same engine, but less demanding. On that 160 should be way easier, we'll see. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see ya next time. Bye guys!